Okay, so after my last video with the recent glitch on the Avata 2 return to home, I decided to come out and do some more testing. And I thought I'll bring you guys along, I'll make a video about it while I do it. See, I want to try and recreate what happened in the last video. And if you haven't seen the previous video, here's a quick run through. So I did a return to home test by flying the drone out of range so that it would return to home on loss of signal. And as we can see here, it turns around, flies back to the point where it lost signal, and then it should ascend to 50 meters high, which is my set return to home altitude. And then it should fly all the way back to me at 50 meters, and then which point it should try and do a landing. But as we can see here, it's climbed to 50 meters, and as soon as it sets off, it starts to decrease its altitude. This is not how the return to home is supposed to work, and because it was reducing altitude, it was also causing me to not get my signal back as quickly as I could have. Now the drone continues to decrease as it flies towards me, and I start to get breakup of signal coming in and out here. And I just started to see flashes coming up on the screen of a tree coming towards me. Luckily, signal had come back and I smashed the brake button just before the drone crashed into the tree. So I then took the flight log and I put it into air data to give me a more in-depth look at what actually happened. So if we pay attention to this line here, it says, setting new return to home altitude to 50 meters. So this tells me that the drone did actually register that my return to home altitude should have been 50 meters. And if we look across to the left-hand side of this line, we can see that the home distance is 0, so it's recording the right home location. The altitude is also registered as 0, so it's got the correct 0 altitude, and everything else looks okay. Then if we look right down at the bottom, at this bottom line here in the first run, we can see sport mode, home point updated, return to home altitude adjusted to 50 meters. This also tells me that the home point has been accurately set to the exact location. We can see here the home distance is 0.1 meters away, and the return to home altitude is adjusted to 50 meters, which is exactly what I set it to. So pay close attention to that as we move forward. And I carry on, I'll move this to the point where it starts to actually play the return to home sequence. So here we can see it says low battery return to home. That's just a warning that comes up on the screen. It doesn't actually affect the performance of the drone. We will see a bit later on that when your battery reaches 18% is when you actually get reduced throttle output. So pay close attention to that. So if we play it forwards a bit, we can see that the device loses connection right here and it goes into fail-safe mode. We can see it turns around, flies home. I'll pause this here because when it says here, return to home aircraft braking, this is because the aircraft has turned around, reached the point at which it lost signal, and it's slowing down in order to initiate the ascend to 50 meters and then the flight back home. So I'll keep playing it forward. We can see aircraft is braking. Now it starts to ascend. We can see the altitude here on the left is increasing. It should go up to 50 meters, at which point it should start to fly forwards. As we can see, the home distance is now decreasing, but the altitude is also decreasing with that. So it's flying towards me and losing altitude. Nothing is happening with my sticks here on the right. The drone just continues to fly towards me whilst decreasing in altitude. You can see it's getting lower and lower. It's still almost 300 meters away and it's already half the height at which it started at. So if we keep letting this play forwards, we can see it keeps going and keeps going. The height now is 10 meters and it's getting even lower. And then here we can see aircraft braking. This is when I got control back, I hit the brake, and we can see the drone actually starts to come to a stop. And if we see here, when it comes to a stop, it's stopping at 7.8 meters above the ground when it's still 214 meters away. So if this flight played forward, the chances are the aircraft was going to be at around about minus 50 meters by the time it reached the home point. We can see now it's back into sport mode. This is me taking control over, flying it back up to altitude, and then flying it back home manually. So I'm also now going to show you the screen recording taken from the DJI Fly app. So we can see here the drone is flying away. It's going to lose signal and it's going to give you the prompt on the screen. So we're going to see in just a second, right now it says, so we're going to see right now, device disconnected, press brake button to cancel return to home. I can't because it's disconnected. We can see the aircraft is braking and is now returning to home. The altitude is increasing up to 50 meters. And as the drone starts to fly forward, the altitude starts to decrease. We can see here, again, press brake button to cancel return to home. It's in fail-safe mode. I can't do anything at this point. It's just coming in and out and in and out. And as it continues to fly towards, we can see the altitude getting lower and lower and lower, and it's going to match that 7.8, 7.9 that we saw in the flight data log, while still being 215 meters away from home. So as far as I can see, there was no user error on my part here. I input all the information correctly. The drone just appears to have had some kind of malfunction where it was decreasing in altitude when it shouldn't have been. So I'm going to do 4 separate tests. I'm going to try and keep things as close to the same sort of scenario as I had before. So I'm going to fly the drone out to the same distance, about 500 meters, going to have it about 20 meters, above the takeoff altitude, and my return to home height is still set to 50 meters, so everything in that aspect is the same. So the first test I'm going to do, I'm going to fly it out. I'm going to activate return to home manually, see what it does. The next test I'm going to do is I'm going to fly out and I'm going to simulate a loss of signal by turning off the RC controller. The drone should then signal this as a loss of signal, fly up and return to home. The next test I'm going to do, I'm going to wait until the battery is at a similar level to what happened before, so 25%. I'm going to be hovering at the correct distance of 500 meters and 20 meters above the ground. Then I'm going to activate return to home manually. And then the last test I'm going to do, I'm going to fly it out, and I'm just going to wait at that distance for low battery return to home to trigger automatically. So that's 4 separate tests, and we'll see how the drone behaves throughout all of those different tests. Now, a few people were mentioning about the fact that the drone had low battery at the time of that return to home incident. The battery was on the lower end of the spectrum, yes, but the drone hadn't already triggered a low battery return to home. And I had actually previously already tested low battery return to home automatic triggering, and that worked fine. The drone made it back with no issues. So I'm going to try these few tests today and see if I can get a repeat of what happened before. Maybe it was just a one-off bug, or maybe it's something that's going to happen again, and we're going to see that today. So let's get it up in the sky and see what happens. Okay, now let's head out to the same distance, so 500 meters and 20 meters above takeoff altitude. Now, what I'm doing with these tests, because we're not going to lose goggle signal, the screen recording should keep recording, and therefore we should be able to get a better view of what's happening. Okay, so we're approaching a similar distance here, around 500 meters. Okay, I'm going to just fly back a touch. Okay, I'm going to turn around here and I'm going to activate return to home manually. So let's activate it. Return to home is activated. Yep, turning around. Now we should ascend to 50 meters altitude. The drone is going up, 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 up. Return to home in progress. Everything is looking good. There's a little bit of wind out today, not too much. You can see a bit of tilt on the screen, but it's nothing too crazy. So now the drone is flying back towards me. It should maintain 50 meters altitude. And so far, so good. Staying at 50 meters. Okay, so this is looking good. No drop in altitude. Everything is looking absolutely perfect. Yeah, very strange. So this is working absolutely fine. Looks like it's going to head all the way back to me at 50 meters and then try and land. I'm going to cancel the landing before it gets to me because it might land in a tree above me. So that kind of dispels one of the myths that some people think maybe it flies the same route back to me. It's not. It's doing exactly what I would expect it to do in this situation. So I'm going to cancel return to home now. I'm going to turn around and then I'm going to go back to the same spot and I'm going to simulate a manual loss of signal by turning off the radio controller. This is also just to help me kind of restore a bit of faith in this machine actually, because as you can imagine after that last scare, it's a bit, ooh, what was going on? Alrighty, so we're approaching a similar distance. I remember this palm tree being roughly 500 meters away. Okay, so now I'm going to activate return to home by doing a simulated loss of signal by turning off the radio controller. Radio controller is turning off. It should say signal lost. Now it should return to home. It's going to normal mode, fail safe, return to home, turns around. It's going to fly to the location it lost signal, and then it's going to stop, ascend, and then make its way back to me. So it's gone to the location it lost signal. It does this weird waving thing. Now it's going to increase its altitude to 50 meters. This is where we should see if it does this correctly and it maintains 50 meters all the way back. This is a simulated loss of RC signal. And if I see any inkling that it's descending, I'm going to switch the radio back on so I can cancel return to home. This instance looks okay. It looks like it's maintaining 50 meters on its way back. There appears to be no issue going on here. Maybe it was just a glitch before, or maybe it was because it was a lower battery voltage, but we'll test that next. So yeah, it appears to be maintaining 50 meters all the way back. So no issues with this one. I'm happy to cancel this return to home right now, so I'm going to switch the radio back on. We should get radio signal back. Now I can cancel the return to home, hit the brake, and then we're going to turn around and we're going to fly around a bit just until the battery drains, and then I can do the simulated, exactly the same situation as it was before. Let's go back into manual mode, we'll fly around a bit, get a few cool shots for you. So we're going to fly around a bit, do some nice flying over the Oh, the rice paddies. Very nice. Anybody out there eat rice? If you do, comment rice in the description. The description, I mean the comments. Alrighty. Actually, I just thought of another test. Somebody mentioned that sometimes during return to home, you can control the altitude of the drone with the sticks. So maybe if my stick was low, that could have contributed to the drone wanting to descend in altitude. So let me test that out, because that could be a viable theory. Although the drone was disconnected for the duration of the flight, we'll see if you can manually adjust altitude with return to home. Okay, stop, return to home, turn around, fly up. Now I'm just leaving the stick where it is for now. Once we get to 50 meters, I'll try and increase and decrease the left-hand stick and see if that has any effect on the altitude. Personally, I don't think it should, because return to home should be locked at the height you set it at, because of an instance like this, if you've lost control and control is flicking in and out, you might have just knocked the stick down, and you know, that could affect things. So I'll put the stick all the way to the bottom. You can now see the stick is all the way down. The drone is not descending. It is still maintaining 50 meters altitude. Okay, well that's that one out of the equation. Okay, I'm going to cancel it. It appears that it's having no effect. Cancel that, return back to manual mode, and we'll fly back to where we were. Battery's starting to get a bit lower now. We're getting closer to that magic 25% that I want to do the test at again. Currently been flying for 12 minutes. That is one thing about this drone flies for a very, very long time. The batteries take freaking ages to charge, but it does fly for a long time. Okay, we're going to make my way out to the same point. We're getting to roughly the right battery level. We're going to be pretty much around 25 when we get to the point to activate return to home. We can see that warning has come up on the screen. Low battery, return to home promptly. That's just telling you, your battery's getting low. You should probably think about returning to home sometime now. So it hasn't automatically activated return to home. I'm going to activate it now. Aircraft braking. Now it should turn around. We're at pretty much exactly the same height, 19 meters, 486 meters away. That's almost bang on what the actual circumstance was. 25% battery. We should now climb to 50 meters and maintain that altitude all the way back. If we now descend, that shows a bit of a bug when the battery level starts to show low, that return to home is not going to maintain the same height. My throttle stick is exactly where I left it. I have not touched it. Now we'll see if it maintains 50 meters. 50, 49, 50. It's maintaining 50 meters. This is, I don't know how to, I don't really know what to say here, because I was hoping to be able to recreate it so that I would be able to say, avoid this in certain situations, but maybe I literally just had a one-time glitch. I haven't done any updates to the drone since that incident. I wanted to keep it in exactly the same settings and format, and it's flying home with no problem. Okay, I'm going to cancel return to home now. Obviously there was no issue here. Now I'm going to fly back to the same location, and I'm going to wait for it to automatically trigger low battery return to home. And we should see, no matter what the battery level is, as soon as it triggers low battery return to home, it should fly back exactly the same. Low battery should not have any effect on the return to home. Now we see we have throttle output reduced. Hopefully I can get to that location that I want to be at before it automatically triggers, but even still, we'll still get a similar understanding. Yeah, I think we'll be able to make it there. 17, 16, 300, 400 meters. And okay, we're just gonna hover around here until it triggers automatic return to home. See what happens. So we're now at 15%, no issues, still waiting. 14%, 13%, 12%, still not triggered, getting a bit concerning. 11%, 10, 11. Okay, if it gets much lower than this, I'll turn around and bring it to a slightly closer distance. Okay, I'm going to bring it a little bit closer in just in case. Maybe on the way back it's going to trigger it anyway. Still seeing low battery return to home promptly. It's not doing an automatic return to home, which is very bizarre because it did do that to me before. Okay, now it's triggered. Okay, it's trying to do a forced landing instead. We'll fly it back. And then we'll just land it here. Flick the goggles off, land it. All right, now that was interesting. So This is confusing. See, I'm pretty sure that as I was flying around before when I was doing previous testing, low battery return to home was already triggered and it made its way back. But for some reason it didn't trigger in that instance. So, okay, I'm just going to intersect this here because the testing I just did was actually the day before. And as I went home, I was kind of thinking, why didn't automatic low battery return to home trigger on the Avata 2? Because I was positive that it happened before. So I came out again, I did some more tests and I found out the reason why. So this is the kind of little nuances that you have to sort of get used to with DJI. See, when I was flying with the DJI FPV controller, the low battery return to home doesn't trigger, but when flying with the motion controller, it does. This is really weird. It's kind of a difference between both controllers. I'm not sure why it is different on both, possibly because it's probably harder to get the drone back at a low battery situation with the motion controller than it is with the FPV3. But basically the sort of battery levels go at 27% on the FPV3, you're going to get the low battery warning. Then when you get to 18%, it's going to give you reduced throttle output, so you're going to have less range of power available to you. This is just to protect the batteries in the Avata 2. And then when you get to 7%, the drone is going to try and do an auto landing. That's when using the DJI FPV3 controller. And when you're using the DJI Motion Controller 3, when you get to 25%, it's going to give you a 15-second countdown till it does its auto low battery return to home. So that's something you need to bear in mind. There are differences between operations from the FPV remote to the motion controller remote. So let's just take a minute to review everything that's just happened. So in my 4 tests, I was not able to recreate the same situation that happened previously when return to home was decreasing in altitude and going to cause a crash. So I think that was just a software glitch at the time. Luckily, it doesn't show itself again. It didn't show itself during any of my tests. I tried 4 different tests, including one at the exact same parameters as the initial test, and it performed as expected. So very strange. Hopefully it was just a one-off and hopefully it doesn't appear again. And the other thing we need to know is that there are differences between how a low battery situation is handled if you're using the motion controller versus using the FPV controller. Now this is something that I wasn't aware of before this, and it's something that DJI's little nuances and how the drone reacts differently when using the motion versus the FPV. I think this is because it's probably easier for the drone to fly back itself when using the motion controller, because if it gets to a low power situation, it's going to be much harder for you to bring it back using the motion controller. So it does make sense, but at the same time, it's something that I haven't heard anybody talk about, and it's something that we do need to be aware of. The second thing I want to talk about is when you're setting your return to home altitude, I feel like you should set it as high as you can within the legal limits. This is going to give you the best possible chance of the drone recovering signal when it's performing that return to home maneuver if you have a loss of signal. And then if anything funny starts to happen, you can see it's happening and you can take over again and just fly it back manually. So do that as a nice safety precaution. Also, just be aware of the differences between the motion controller and the FPV controller and how they react. And you'll probably have a pretty good experience. See, I've been absolutely loving the Avata 2. Had that little hiccup, but to be honest, apart from that, it's an absolutely fantastic drone, and I will have a full review coming out very shortly. So thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little follow-up and seeing what happened, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.